Picture a farmer sitting at a kitchen table at 2 in the morning, staring at a screen full of numbers that don't add up. Commodity prices down, input costs up, and parked outside in the dark, a $200,000 machine that can't move because a sensor tripped, and the only person legally allowed to fix it is a dealership technician 3 counties away. That moment, that exact, infuriating, financially devastating moment is what the biggest story in American agriculture right now is actually about. And it all runs through one company. Green paint, yellow logo, a name every farmer in this country knows. This is not just a story about tractors. This is a story about power, about who controls the American food supply, and about a fight that has been brewing for years and finally, in 2026, is starting to crack open. Let's start with the ground truth. The American farm economy is hurting, not slightly uncomfortable, genuinely hurting. Net farm income has been declining for consecutive years. Commodity prices, despite some hope from a renewed trade agreement with China, remain deeply pressured by massive yields from last fall's harvest. More grain in the bins means lower prices per bushel. Lower prices per bushel means tighter margins. Tighter margins means farmers are not buying new equipment. And when farmers stop buying new equipment, the ripple hits hard and fast. Sales of four-wheel drive tractors fell nearly 42% in 2025 alone, and combine sales dropped 36%. Let that sink in for a second. Nearly half of all large tractor sales gone. And the North American ag equipment market is expected to decline another 15 to 20% in 2026. These are not rounding errors. These are structural signals that something much bigger is happening beneath the surface of American agriculture. So what does this mean for the company at the center of it all? The forecast is sobering. Net income for fiscal year 2026 is projected to fall to between $4 billion and $4.75 billion, down from the $5 billion reported the year prior. Shares took a significant hit when that forecast dropped, falling nearly 6% in a single session. The market sent a clear message. This is not a blip, this is a cycle, and this cycle is grinding farmers and equipment makers alike into the dirt. But here's where the story gets complicated and important, because within that pain, something unexpected is happening. The pressure is forcing change, real change, the kind that farmers have been demanding for years and getting nowhere on. Think about that farmer at 2 in the morning again. The machine is broken. It's planting season. Every hour it sits still costs real money, not spreadsheet money, real money. Lost acres, lost yield, loans that keep compounding. And the reason that farmer can't just fix it themselves? Software locks, encrypted diagnostic systems, a deliberate architecture designed to route every repair through one company's dealer network at prices set by that same company on their timeline. Plaintiffs in a major class action lawsuit claim the company intentionally made crucial software and repair tools inaccessible to farmers and independent repair shops, and by cornering the repair market, could artificially inflate prices without competition. Farm Progress. That lawsuit just settled. The settlement reached $99 million, and as part of the agreement, diagnostic tools must be made available to farmers and independent shops for at least a decade. Now, critics immediately called this a slap on the wrist for a company doing billions in annual revenue, and they're not wrong to question it, but symbolically, this is seismic, because it is the clearest signal yet that the era of total software control over farm equipment is ending, whether the manufacturers want it to or not. Farm Progress. And it's not just the courts applying pressure, the regulators are moving too. The Federal Trade Commission has taken direct aim at agricultural equipment monopolies, mandating fair access to the encryption keys required for routine legal maintenance. The message from Washington is now explicit. Farmers have the right to fix their own machines. And this is not a partisan issue. This cuts across every political line because it speaks to something fundamental about what it means to own something. On top of that, The EPA has updated its rules around diesel exhaust fluid sensing, a change estimated to save family farms approximately $727 million annually. For anyone who has ever had a DEF sensor trip in the middle of harvest and watched a perfectly functional machine go into limp mode, this is not a small thing. The updated policy gives producers more flexibility to address issues before performance is impacted, extending the window of time before a machine derates. In planting and harvest, that window is everything. So let's connect this back to the farm. What does all of this actually mean for the person trying to grow food in America right now? First, the cost of being a farmer just got a little bit more manageable, and that's not a sentence people have been able to say much lately. Access to independent repair shops, access to diagnostic tools, longer DEF windows, these are not glamorous headlines, but they are real dollars. For a mid-size operation running tight margins, cutting a $300 dealer service call and replacing it with a self-diagnosis could be the difference between black and red at the end of the year. Second, the used equipment market is telling a fascinating story. New tractor sales across all segments are down nearly 9% in the first 3 months of 2026, but auction data shows a growing 12.5% price increase for specific late-model used tractors. Farmers are holding on to what they have, they're fixing what they have, and in some cases, they're willing to pay a premium for recently used iron rather than take on the financing burden of brand new equipment in an environment where commodity prices are still uncertain. That used equipment premium is a window into the psychology of the American farmer right now, cautious, strategic, and playing the long game. Third, and this is the part that matters most for the decade ahead, technology is being democratized on the farm in ways that would have seemed impossible 5 years ago. The cost of precision agriculture technology has historically been a massive barrier, but new business models are emerging that spread the cost out over time, lowering the upfront burden and allowing more farmers to access tools that were previously only available to the largest operations. Technologies like precision spraying systems that use computer vision to identify weeds and apply chemical only where it's needed. Systems that track yield data, soil data, weed pressure, and machine performance, all feeding into a single picture of what's happening on every acre. The future of precision agriculture isn't just bigger machines or more automation. It's about connecting every data point on the farm and turning it into actionable insight fast enough to matter in the field. And critically, that technology is now being retrofitted onto older machines. You don't need to buy a new $500,000 combine to access some of these tools. That is a genuine shift in access, and access is everything. Now, to be clear, none of this means the pain is over. Farmers are still grappling with tariff policies that squeezed demand and raised costs. And while a renewed trade deal with China raised hopes, there are still real questions about whether the ramp-up of soybean and wheat sales will be enough to pull the U.S. farm economy out of a years-long slump. The uncertainty is real. The pressure is real. The workforce cuts that began in 2024, more than 2,000 workers laid off across multiple facilities, left a mark that a partial recall of 300 workers in 2026 has barely begun to address. But here's the thing about agriculture. It is the most cyclical industry on earth. It always has been. You plant in uncertainty. You harvest in uncertainty. The farmers who survive don't survive because conditions got easy. They survived because they adapted. They found ways to do more with less. They fixed their own machines. They bought smarter. They leveraged every tool available. And they kept showing up. The story of what's happening with American agricultural equipment in 2026 is ultimately the story of a reckoning for manufacturers who built empires on artificial scarcity of repair access, a reckoning for a farm economy that expanded on the assumption that commodity prices would stay high, and a reckoning for policymakers who are finally being forced to choose, clearly and publicly, whose side they're on. At the end of that long night, that farmer is still going to walk out to the field. The machine is going to get fixed, one way or another. and the crop is going in the ground. Because that's what happens in America. The ground doesn't wait, and neither do the people who work it.